Hello and welcome to the Delta Source Podcast, your number one source for extreme battle plan scrutiny. Today we've got Good Call Paul and myself, Mr. Legitimacy, and we are here to put on trial the rescue plan at Geonosis.
Yes, we're going to armchair general this and determine how it should have been done, perhaps. See what mistakes the Jedi might have made along the way.
It's one of those many things that, as you just watch a movie, you just kind of get ferried along through it, and you're like, wow, suddenly there's a bunch of Jedi. Oh no, the tide has turned. Now they're in dire straits. Oh, but the reinforcements arrived, so it's all okay.
Okay, most of them are dead, but...
We are gonna examine all the lead up and the planning and try to figure out what we can about what ended up with this being the plan that happened. So, I have 4 main questions to guide us in this investigation.
And I have not heard these questions beforehand, so I'll be coming up with responses off the cuff.
So number
just like
one,
a real interviewee.
How much intelligence did the Jedi Council have before planning the rescue of Obi-Wan?
Well, I will ignore the obvious joke, and instead just say, from what we know, the broadcast that Obi-Wan sent them about he's on Geonosis, there's what's the exact word of the broadcast? Something like, I'm on Geonosis, there's droid factories here, there's someone's putting together an army to try and take down the Republic. Also, oh man, I'm being attacked by a droideka, and then you see a droideka on screen for a few seconds.
Exactly.
That's pretty much the only thing we see that they know for sure.
Yeah. So what I went to the source, the Delta source, if you will.
Oh, yes.
To the film to try to look at everything that Obi-Wan reported to the Council while he was out on this whole adventure. So he transmits to them before he pursues Jango Fett on Kamino. And he has direct communication with them in real time, and he tells them about the clone army existing, ordered by Sifo Dyas 10 years ago, and it's ready for pickup. Tells them the source DNA came from Jango Fett, who was hired by Darth Tyrannus. And then they direct Obi-Wan to take Jango Fett into custody. And so that's the last time he has direct communication with the Council. Because then the whole thing with Jango Fett leads him to Geonosis, and by the time he gets there, sneaks around in the factory, and gets back to his ship, he can't reach the Council, so he has to transmit to Anakin on Tatooine. What in the blazes is he doing there? And gives off the transmission that you said.
Right.
So presumably, Anakin transmits the entirety of the message.
Yes, I don't think he would leave anything out. I would say that's probably fair to assume.
And furthermore, they are under the assumption or impression that Anakin and Padme are going to stay on Tatooine. So the whole plan that they do, they know there's a droid factory. They know the Separatist Alliance have pledged their allegiance to Count Dooku, and they're forming an army, a droid army. And they are going there to rescue one Jedi.
Yes. Just Obi-Wan, because the other 2 are supposed to be on Tatooine, and as far as they know, they don't know that they left. At no point would they realize that, or have reason to have realized that.
Yeah. So, I think that's a pretty good examination of what intelligence they had. That leads us to question number 2. Did the Jedi Council expect Yoda to arrive with clone reinforcements?
I believe the answer to that is yes. There's a line from Yoda to Mace Windu about going to Kamino and picking up the army, while Windu takes the troopers, or takes the Jedi that they have to Geonosis to try and rescue Kenobi at that point.
Yes.
That's all that they know about.
And Mace Windu also seems to expect this. I'll admit a little bit with my research. Some of it was watching actual clips of the film, some of it was looking up a script, so this script might be like, an early draft. It might not be in the final film, but
Right.
from Mace Windu, I copy pasted. We cannot wait for the Senate to make up its mind about granting the Chancellor emergency powers in order to be able to use that clone army. We have the authority to go now. We must go now. So, Mace Windu also is on the same page that they are going to go use it now.
And that's interesting too, because the whole point of the emergency powers was to be able to cut through the bureaucracy, but apparently that didn't even do it. There was no point in giving him emergency powers, because if you still had to wait,
yeah,
that just, there was no point to any of that. I mean, Palpatine had a point to it, obviously, but it didn't apparently speed up the process enough to actually let the Senate authorize anything about anything.
So I will say, because again, I didn't actually watch a clip of the movie that had that. That could be a plot hole that was fixed by a later draft of the script, but
that is possible.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the movie in a bit.
But so I think it's firmly established they did expect Yoda to bring the clone reinforcements, but this is what is not clear in the movie. Did they have an estimated time of arrival for when Yoda would get there, and how long did they expect to wait for the reinforcements?
And that's an interesting question. And they know where Camino is, obviously. They know where Geonosis is, and those two planets are pretty close.
Yeah.
Galactically speaking. Now, they make a note in pretty much any piece of supplementary material that the Acclamator class transport, which are the clone trooper carrier ships, the ones that you see at the end of the two, have a hyperdrive that is very fast.
Okay.
It's noted to be capable of making 0.6, which is to say only slightly slower than the 0.5 of the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Which is blazingly fast and extremely impressive, especially for a capital ship that big. Especially given the fact that the technology is supposedly slightly more primitive in the Republic era than it is in the Imperial era. That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But did the Jedi know the capabilities of the ships that they had attached to the clone army? I don't think that they would have.
Yeah, because Obi-Wan didn't transmit specs or readouts about
it's like they have a manual of this is this assault ship, it goes this fast and has this many guns. So they wouldn't have known. Now, they would have known, travel time from here to here should take about this long. If I recall correctly, it actually might have stated somewhere, maybe in the Essential Guide to Vessels and Vehicles, which features, I actually have it on my lap right here with me in case, because it has a whole section in the back, a small section on the Battle of Geonosis with like a little picture of the battlefield as it was laid out, and not to scale, drawn on the bottom, because but it's kind of neat. It's very minimal, but it's kind of neat. But I think they even make a note that Yoda actually arrived surprisingly quickly. Like, perhaps even before they'd expected him to be there.
Okay.
Because these ships had remarkably quick hyperdrives for a ship of their size.
That is very interesting. So that tells me that the plan would have been even worse if Yoda arrived
They should have
unexpected.
all been dead. The ship was, it's here, direct quote from page 115 of the new Essential Guide. The assault ship's class 0.6 hyperdrive, unusually fast for a craft of the Acclamator's class, enabled the clone army to reach Geonosis soon after Obi-Wan's capture. So, they wouldn't have known that, but they got real lucky.
Yeah.
On that score, because if they'd been 10 minutes later, everyone would have been dead.
Yeah.
If they'd been 5 minutes later, everyone would have been dead.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So I think that's enough to lead us to question number 3. And that is, how many Jedi were sent to rescue Obi-Wan? Because they did not know it was going to be 2 Jedi, and they did not know it was going to be a political prisoner in Padme. It was just to rescue a single Jedi.
Just a Jedi Knight, not even a Master. Not on the Council, just a Knight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'd made Master at that point anyway, because you got to train a Padawan to make Master, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So, once again, I found this in the script page, but I think Yoda said 200 Jedi, let's send enough, let's hope they are.
And that sounds about right.
That's 200 is the number I had heard, and had internalized in my memory, so seeing it in this script, whether draft or finalized, to me, I take that as enough evidence that it was actually 200.
Wikipedia says 102, but I don't know where they're getting that number from.
Is there like a reference link on
Attack of the Clones 4, which is a comic. Okay, there was an Attack of the Clones Dark Horse comic tie-in, which mentions specifically the 100 Jedi of the Geonosis strike team participated in the arena battle.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily. I mean,
either way, it's the same order of magnitude.
Yes, it's a chunk of the organization for sure. I mean,
you're rescuing 10 to the 0 Jedi by spending 10 to the squared Jedi.
And you're also really kind of shoving your way into a very unstable political situation.
Yeah.
That could very well kick off a war that might not have to happen yet. Right? Like, nobody's declared war on anybody yet. Nobody's shooting yet.
Yeah.
But if you go to a planet where you don't have authority with 100 soldiers and start mowing people down in order to rescue one of your guys, you're not really indicating that you're very interested in pursuing peace at that point, I don't think.
No. They didn't, and they didn't even, like, like, hail anybody to say, hey, we're the Jedi here in orbit. We want to rescue our guy. You have a chance to give him to us peacefully.
Right. You send an ambassador or something at least and be like, hey, we can negotiate. Like, hostage negotiations can be a thing here. This doesn't have to end in violence immediately.
Instead, Mace Windu goes up behind their leaders, ready to apprehend or maybe even assassinate them.
And it's actually even kind of worse than that if you take the Clone Wars video game from 2002.
Yes.
I think it is, the one with the vehicle combat, you know?
Yeah, I know the one.
Also Jedi Starfighter as well. Both cover sort of immediately before the battle in the arena, and both involve you having to sort of escort. The Clone Wars game specifically has you escort 2 transports full of Jedi to the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And you come under attack from Trade Federation and Separatist forces along the way, and you blow them all up with your tank.
Wait,
so
you are a clone transport?
You're Mace Windu, escorting the Jedi transport.
Okay.
Yes, you play as Mace Windu, and I think Luminara is with you, and the two of you are in tanks, in TX-130s, in fact, on the battlefield, and you engage Separatist forces and blow a bunch of them up with missiles and lasers, and then some Jedi transports land, and you have to escort them to the arena. And if you lose one of the transports, then like half the Jedi die without even. If you lose both the transports, it's game over. But anyway,
we'll be generous and say that didn't actually happen in the movie.
Right, we could say that's a lower level of canon, but they're definitely. This is like we're into not even special operations hostage rescue at this point. We're into deploying tanks and just blasting our way through in an attempt to rescue one guy, which sort of goes against the whole Jedi philosophy of like accept your death if it might mean, saving others. And losing Obi-Wan in order to prevent a galactic war from kicking off right now seems like a good trade. I don't know.
If Obi-Wan had the choice, he would have let himself be martyred to prevent the war.
If he knew that him dying here would give them time to stop and negotiate, he would have for sure sacrificed himself to save possibly billions of lives. Certainly, by the end of the war, billions of lives. But he didn't really get that choice because the Jedi just came barging in, and they didn't know they were rescuing the Chosen One or a senator. They didn't know she was there.
At the very least, Obi-Wan, could have still done the same stuff he did, outflanking the execution beasts.
Right. I'm sure he would have, even if he'd been alone.
But, a lone Jedi avoiding his own execution would not have been the same diplomatic, declaration of war that did transpire.
So, sure, and I don't... Yeah. Oh, sorry, go
ahead. I think we've kind of exhausted this question.
Mm-hmm.
And so my final question, which I'm sure will, lead us to continue examining other aspects, is did the Jedi have an exit plan?
Well.
So I think we have to make some guesses, inferences, because they did not know necessarily that Obi-Wan was in the arena before they arrived at Geonosis. Presumably, they're in orbit, in stealth, and they are, observing the surface, probing it somehow, and they pinpoint the arena, because they knew to go there. They had to know he was in the arena. So, once they are in the Geonosis system, and they know Obi-Wan is in the arena, how do they plan to get in and get out?
Right, and they get in no problem. I'm assuming through like mind tricks and that sort of thing. But as for leaving, I guess they were hoping the clone army would come and bail them out because
At a later time than when they actually arrived.
Right. I guess they just assumed that they could somehow fight possibly an entire planet's worth of who knows what. Certainly droids, because they see that the enemy has, droidicas at least, and probably other stuff as well, and Jango's there, and, probably Dooku as well. Well, they know Dooku's there. Yeah. So, they assume they could win a war against that for possibly hours until their reinforcements arrive, possibly longer than that. And that's even assuming that there's not some sort of orbital defenses around Geonosis that might try to shoot down, like, a large transport ship, for example.
I would say this is quite an example of the hubris and arrogance of the prequel Jedi.
Yes, I would agree. They're just like, no, we'll go in sword swinging. Help will definitely show up in time. It'll be fine.
We've got, some of our highest ranked masters and most well-trained Jedi here. They're totally,
the cream
they
of
can
the
totally
order
handle it.
Is going. Where's letting Windu, for crying out loud? He can handle it, right?
Yeah.
And they seem almost, because when Windu has that line about the Geonosians aren't warriors, and Dooku says, "Well, what about 1,000 battle droids?" The Jedi, Mace Windu seems kind of surprised at that.
Yeah,
but I don't know
and also
why
that's a small number.
Well, one Jedi versus 1,000 battle droids, I think, is the number.
Oh, okay.
Like, one Jedi's worth 100 Geonosians. Well, how would they fare against 1,000 battle droids?
Okay.
Yeah.
So 102 times 1,000.
Right. So maybe 10,000 battle droids deployed.
That sounds more accurate.
More than enough to kill 100 Jedi, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Apparently, more than enough to kill about. I mean, they killed like 20 or so. We don't see that many left at the end of it.
Yeah. So. They know there's this droid army, and they assume they can just hold out until the reinforcements arrive. But what really confuses me is that all the Jedi are positioned around the arena in, little alcoves and hallways.
Right.
And they all step out whenever it's time to reveal their hand, and from behind them, in every direction, come droids. So, did they not, look at the arena and say, okay, let's have some people positioned in these type of ways, and some people positioned in, rear flank, watching the hallways to make sure we have secured exit channels?
Right. Covering the exits is pretty important in a hostage retrieval type of... If you're planning on smashing and grabbing, you need to be able to get out. That's very important. I don't think they had an exit strategy, which, for a movie that came out, when it did, really fitting in some ways, I suppose you could say. I'll leave that where it is. But you make a very good point. I don't know if maybe the droids hadn't been activated yet, and they were kind of all hiding, and so the Jedi just didn't notice them, but that's kind of pathetic if you don't infiltrate an arena inside a planet that's basically a whole big droid factory, and you don't ever notice, oh, there are a lot of droids here.
Right.
Which, again, they seem awfully surprised about that development. Maybe more surprised than they should have been. It just doesn't seem like it was very well thought out.
No,
I guess.
Certainly not. And that's why I really wanted to put this on trial, because I want to, one, determine, just how bad of a mess up this was, what type of repercussions should be faced by whoever is responsible for this plan.
Somebody should have gotten fired over this, for sure.
And then, to a lesser extent, we can speculate about whose plan it was.
Right.
I think it's hard to not pin this plan on Mace Windu, since he's, the highest-ranking person there.
Right, that's
so,
true.
Everything is going to be run by him, whether or not he came up with the plan.
And they had a while in space to, in transit to come up with some sort of plan. Mm-hmm. But I guess the plan was, let's all just turn our lightsabers on and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Which,
So as much as I love Mace Windu, this, for me, this is a really bad look for him. That he, by at the very least, not vetoing aspects of this plan led to the kickoff of the war. And then, that's sort of compounded in, like, the Shatterpoint book. Where,
oh, yeah, that's a good point.
He's expressing, or not expressing, he's dealing internally with his regret over not being able to get Dooku and not being able to stop the war right there.
Right, stop the whole war before it. And he could have, he chose not to.
Well, yeah, but not even that so much, just like if he hadn't let the plan become what it was, they wouldn't have been in this position. He wouldn't have had to choose between getting Dooku or not. So the war was kind of on his shoulders anyway.
Oh man, yeah, he can kind of. I mean, he doesn't know that Palpatine's behind it all, obviously, because there's no real avoiding that fact. But this is what you call an unforced error, I think, on the Jedi's part, because Palpatine didn't make them do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to this is how they were going to do their hostage rescue. And yeah, I guess Mace was the guy with operational command on the ground at the time.
I mean, I guess we could also, to some extent equally pin it on Yoda because he was in charge of the other big chunk of bringing an army to bear upon the Separatist Alliance. And,
he doubled down on that for sure.
Yeah. But as for the logistics of the arena, Yoda was not at Geonosis when they were, presumably in orbit figuring out how they were going to approach this. So I don't think we can pin it on Yoda that they didn't have an exit plan out of the arena.
Yeah. Because they could have probably done that a bit better if they just focused super hard on cutting their way out of one of the tunnels rather than adopting a defensive posture and just slowly letting them, get surrounded and crushed by droids.
Yeah.
There was a way to, like, spearhead your way out of the arena once you'd rescued the hostages. And they didn't. And even, like, independent of the clone troopers, the Republic has to have some sort of, like, hovercraft that you could use to, like, park over the arena and have, fast rope down from it or even, like, climb back up to it afterwards. They wouldn't have had Republic gunships yet, but they would have for sure had something.
Right.
So they could have, even like a cloud car or like an airspeeder that's been armored a bit. We know that the Geonosis apparently didn't have any anti-aircraft like weaponry to try and stop that from happening because the gunships don't seem to have any problems with landing in the arena. So.
Oh yeah. So I was thinking, like, what if you use the existing Republic hovercrafts and instead of just positioning your Jedi in the hallways, you position your Jedi to simultaneously take out all the anti-air, but there isn't even anti-air.
Apparently not, unless it got taken out off screen, which you do some of that in a couple of video games. There's some turrets around the arena you have to shoot, I think.
Okay.
But how much of that is actually canon, how much of that is we had to have some gameplay here? I'll let listeners decide at their discretion.
Right.
So yeah, either way, they had air superiority, clearly, by the time that the clone troopers showed up. Which there was nothing stopping those gunships from landing. They certainly could have just done this from the air.
Yeah.
And not even been in the arena for longer than about 5-10 minutes. And
not they could have sent 20 Jedi instead of 100.
Yeah, right, just get them down, fast rope down, or just force jump even. Down from the speeder, air speeder, whatever. Grab everybody, jump back up, fly away.
Oh my gosh,
Easy.
Okay.
Everybody gets to go home.
I'm having a fun little imagination. Like, imagine, a strike team of 20 Jedi doing high orbital parachuting.
Oh, man.
So, they fall all the way down to the arena without showing up on any radars because they're just small organics.
Yeah,
and
they wouldn't
then
sensors have. Yeah.
They quickly save Obi-Wan. Then the ships come down and extract them really fast.
Right, they don't even. The enemy has no way of knowing what's happening until it's way too late. Because they can't possibly just detect a dude falling out of high orbit. I mean, that would ODST-style Jedi insertion.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
That, you know what? That could have been really cool. We didn't need to have a war here even, because, like, sending your people in and extracting a hostage and then leaving with minimal, like, damage, at that point you can still claim to be not the aggressor.
Right.
In that situation, you could be like, hey, look, we're just trying to get our guy out. We don't want a war. If you barge in with gunships and Jedi and start killing people, then again, you're not. You could have handled that a lot more delicately than they did, I guess.
Definitely.
You could say. And I don't really know. Obviously, so the plot could happen, but like, there are ways that maybe could have been done better from a writing perspective, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously we're not trying to sit here and fix the prequels from a in or out of universe perspective right now, but yeah, there's big miss on the part of the whole Jedi Order there. Really, a big miss on their planning department. I guess maybe they hadn't done any like hostage rescue operations in quite a while, so they were just out of practice.
Maybe so. I am just flabbergasted. I'm baffled at the reactionary nature of this entire mission.
They have the audacity to call Anakin reckless after taking 100 or possibly 200 Jedi off to go get killed to rescue one guy and also kick off a war. Oh, Anakin, don't jump over the side of the speeder. You're the reckless one here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably good for this episode. We could go on to examine the stuff in your guide to vehicles and weapons there about the actual land battle of Geonosis, but I think that's an entirely separate episode.
Yes, I agree. We could talk about that another time. I would love to. We probably will talk about that another time because there's a lot I can say about that. But for now, the initial phase of the Battle of Geonosis, the arena fight, I think we've shown pretty clearly. And neither of us are tacticians, obviously. Neither of us are, but we were capable of coming up with a better plan. Pretty. I don't know. It's easy. I guess hindsight's 2020. Looking back on it.
Yeah.
Surely the Jedi Order should have handled this better. Surely they should have been able to handle this better. Someone should have lost their job over this.
Absolutely.
Tell you what.
So, until next time, this has been Delta Source, your number one source for casting shame on high-ranking Jedi Masters.
Yes, exactly.
And may the Force be with you all.